And go ahead and record. So here we go. Everyone, welcome to another WACCT webinar. Today we have with us a special guest, our statewide superintendent, Megan Degenfelder, who, as you all know, is a great partner to the colleges on so many levels on her oversight of the Department of Education and the K-12 activities. She's got part of her platform focusing on career and technical education, and I'll let her speak to that. And a lot of that is why we're so excited to have her here today. So Superintendent Degenfelder, what we have here today is a nice mix of community college trustees. We'll have some presidents, we'll have some key staff and some folks at the commission. And we call it our community college family. So welcome, and we're really excited to have you here today. What I'll do is keep an eye on the chat. If people want to chat me a question, I'll bring it up later. And if it's something that people want to just raise their hand, you can sure just do this, or you can use your raise your hand function, and we can have the superintendent field some questions as well. So with that, Superintendent, I am so pleased to have you here today. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Erin, for having me. I really appreciate it this afternoon. It's great to see everyone. As some of you know, my father was on the Casper College Board of Trustees and was involved in WACCT. And so, have heard a lot of earfuls about community colleges and their importance. And so, right at the dinner table. And so it's not lost on me, the work that you all do in the community colleges and the system that we have, and the need to really, I think, continue to build bridges between, or amongst all of our educational pipeline. And so I'm excited about continuing to do that. I'm really thrilled that Laurel Ballard was just hired for the director of the Community College Commission. She, of course, worked at the Wyoming Department of Education prior to moving over to the commission. And so I'm excited to see how we can better partner in those efforts as well, just knowing her expertise with K-12 and now with community colleges. So I think a lot of exciting things to come. I thought I would share with you all, how things are looking in the world of K-12, how we're doing, kind of what our priority areas are, including career and technical education, as Erin mentioned, some recent partnerships with the colleges. I can touch on some things going on at the federal level, and then would love to just have a conversation of how we can partner more. I think our recent partnership with Central Wyoming College has shown just how much we can do if we work together. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for that, especially as we look to what the vision is for higher education in the state of Wyoming. I think a shared vision is really important. I have a really interesting, unique position in that I get to sit as an ex officio on both the UW Board of Trustees as well as the Community College Commission. And so seeing kind of those two worlds, I have, a different lens in that. And I think that we can really continue to build in really great and fantastic ways. So how we're doing, just a couple of weeks ago, we released the state assessment results as well as school performance ratings. So the assessment results, everyone knows that's the statewide test that all of our students take in the 3 different content areas, which are English language arts, math, and science. And so that's the test. Everyone's familiar with that. School performance ratings is part of our accountability system, and it's most heavily weighted based on the assessment, but it also factors in a lot of different other things to really get a better measure of how well a school is doing. So on top of just achievement on the assessment, it's looking at things like growth, equity, post-secondary readiness, different indicators that show a more holistic picture, you would say. So the good news is that we are moving in the positive direction on both of those things. Our state assessment results were up this year, which was really exciting. Each of the content areas all saw an increase of anywhere between 1% and 3% from last year. And we are at above pre-pandemic levels for both English language arts and science. Math is only 0.4% away from pre-pandemic levels. So really closing the gap on math as well. Every grade level, except for grade 6, saw an increase in achievement from last year. So really good stuff, very exciting. We saw some major wins in different districts. And then the school performance ratings went up as well. But we still have work to do. Of course, we want to see that achievement grow. And we still have about 7% of Wyoming schools that are not meeting expectations for 3 or more years. And so what we're really going to be doing now is leaning into the data and figuring out where those issue areas are, and then how we can collaborate with districts and schools that are doing really well with those that need a little bit more help in those areas. So more to come in how we look at kind of changing up our statewide system of support. So that's how we're doing. NAEP results, again, as a reminder, we do really well compared to the vast majority of states in the country. In terms of reading, we are third in the country, just under Massachusetts and Department of Defense. On third grade reading. Eighth grade reading, we do drop to about 16th in the country. So we're starting to look into, what's going on between our fourth graders and our eighth graders in that way. As a nation, however, we continue to have a lot of work to do. The bar, it could be higher in our country. We actually saw declining results in reading across the country. And so those are things that we need to continue to work on, and we'll continue doing that. But Wyoming doing really well comparatively, which is good news. In terms of our priority areas at the Department of Education, we remain really laser focused in that strategic plan that I set out upon taking office. And that's 6 key initiative areas that we're still really focused on. That includes parental empowerment, preparing students for jobs through career and technical education, patriotism in schools, reducing bureaucracy, valuing our teachers, and then early literacy. So those have kind of been our guiding initiatives in the agency. We've continued to build at the Wyoming Department of Education. We just had a reorganization to try to become more efficient and reduce top heavy leadership into really experts. I changed a position from high leadership to literacy because we were losing a federal grant, which now I think we're getting back. Long story. But to really prioritize literacy in the agency with our positions there. We're also trying to combine our state supports with our federal supports so that we can better leverage federal dollars. And I'll talk a little bit more about what we're kind of seeing from the feds. I was with the U.S. Secretary of Education last week and the week before for 2 different events. And so, the good news is, as I list out our 6 key initiative areas, those align really perfectly well with those of Secretary McMahon. At our meeting in Austin with other state superintendents, they really prefaced that the Secretary's discretional funds are really going to center around literacy, school choice, returning authority to the states, AI, CTE, and civics. And so really, really, again, aligns well with what we're doing. They want to prioritize the states getting competitive grants. And so we're going to be looking at how do we strengthen our applications as a state education agency to just get more of those monies. I think it's an ever-changing place, which you guys know full well in terms of community college funding. And so we're trying to navigate through all of that. I want to touch a little bit more on career and technical education. We've had a lot of great things over the last couple years that we've been able to achieve. So a couple of things. Number one, we've worked with the legislature to make some changes. We doubled the funding for our career technical student organizations. They hadn't had an increase of funding since the year 2000. And one thing that I think we continue to really hear loud and clear is this demand for career and technical education. And we're seeing responsiveness from our legislators on that and valuing that. And so we did that. We also moved career technical education out of the block grant for school districts to ensure that they're spending money where that belongs. And some other changes as well is in terms of Perkins funding. We actually cut our Perkins plan in half and reduced the application by well over 50%. So just trying to make it a lot easier to get those monies straight to our districts. Then we also launched this really exciting partnership with Central Wyoming College that I wanted to talk a little bit about, and I think could serve maybe as a pilot for partnerships with other colleges around the state. So I want to rewind back a couple of years when I was, first in, and we had some remaining COVID dollars. And one area that I really wanted to look at is not only career and technical education, but also looking at how we move the needle for achievement for our Native American students, and how we look at Fremont County school districts, because those are some of our lower performing districts. And so I traveled to Riverton and met with all of the Fremont County school districts. There are 8 of them, so quite a few with all different needs. And we sat down and we really talked through, what those needs are, what could best help to change. And it really fell around career and technical education, or more hands-on learning, as well as work keys, which is a component of the ACT testing that you can use towards Hathaway as well. Also met with leaders of the tribes, and it came to the same conclusion: more hands-on learning was really necessary, more help with the ACT. And so what we did is we entered into an MOU with Central Wyoming College, and we gave over $1 million towards this project of those COVID dollars. And what we were able to do, what CWC and Kathy Wells, she really led the way with this. I can't say enough about her work on this. But we really had a couple of different areas where that funding was used. Number one was this partnership with Career to Pathways. And it's really interesting if you're not familiar with it. It's a CTE vendor that really works with students to create different pathway options. This is a multi-year deal that we're working on. They've done trainings with the school districts, really connects what opportunities are available to students. Then the college also reinvigorated their online portal for dual and concurrent enrollment, going from literally pen and paper to this seamless pipeline. And so that's just been launched. They're seeing huge success there, which is exciting. And then third has been around instructional equipment. And the idea here, oh, and I should mention too, Pathways to Careers. What we also did, the exercise was working between the college and all of the school districts to say, what CTE options do you currently have available and where are your needs? Because I think in a lot of ways, our community colleges can address that need, but in many ways, maybe our districts and our colleges aren't communicating as well as we could be, or partnering. And so that was kind of the desire there. And so that helped to then see where are the gaps, and then where can the college fill those gaps, et cetera. And so then the third component was around purchasing instructional equipment. And that was done for culinary arts, welding, automotive, and I think nursing assistant. And that included some mobile devices that could be transportable to the different school districts, as well as helping to get students from the districts into the community colleges. So that's been a couple years in the making, but we've kind of fully launched now. And so it will be exciting to see, the uptick in programs, dual and concurrent, where that kind of goes. But it was a really great partnership. And again, just really excited to see where we can go from there. The other part of that was work keys training. So ACT came on site for different work keys training for all of the school districts. Work keys is for one of the levels of Hathaway can be utilized. And so for our students that are otherwise not getting the scores that they need to for Hathaway, that is a great option. So wanted to highlight that. I think there's considerable more work that we can continue to do. I want to touch as we look at how you truly create these pathway options for students and make it more student-centered learning, move away from this one-size-fits-all model. We've recognized that we have to look at all of this great work that districts are doing to have more competency-based learning, more work-based learning, project-based learning. And a lot of that means that our accountability system has to change. We can't expect innovation without changing the structure in which our schools and teachers have to operate. And so what we're now exploring, WAEA, our state accountability system, is changing for the high schoolers their 5th indicator of school performance ratings. That's around post-secondary readiness. And we just brought it up to the State Board of Education last week, and they were supportive. So we'll continue moving forward to see what that will look like. But it changes our accountability system to account for more than just the current, did they have an ACT score? Did they get into the military? Those very just baseline into, okay, are they actually prepared for post-secondary? Do they have those soft skills, that profile of a graduate that the state board developed? how can we actually put that into effect? And so the thought is that we would create student success plans. And we do this for alternative school accountability, where every student has an individualized success plan that's based on those things of job preparedness or if they're actually ready for the next step. So we're just starting to dive into that. We'll be getting groups of superintendents together and curriculum directors to talk about what that could look like. But we really want to lean into this idea more of how this is more student-centered learning, and we're not just, doing this one size fits all. I think then in that case, there's just tremendous more opportunity with the colleges to look at how we have dual and concurrent enrollment, how we look to better support them as they enter the community colleges. I just think that there's really really great opportunity there, and so we'll look to work with you all on that. Also, the idea of just again how we have a more seamless pipeline from K-12 to higher education. We're still kind of looking at how you more digitalize student transcripts. The digital wallet was something that Laurel Ballard was working on at the Department of Education when she left. And so I think that's an area we can pick it back up. I also look at this new change with the Wyoming Innovation Partnership and then working with the Business Alliance is how do we get more involved with business and industry in education. UW wants to look at more experiential learning for their students. I don't think it would be a far-fetched dream to say that we want every graduating student in Wyoming high schools to have an experiential learning opportunity. And so, what that looks like if it's within the colleges, if it's with local businesses, that sort of thing. And so I think it's a really exciting time. We have this opportunity to just do so much more. We're seeing more and more flexibility from the federal level to really create our own, accountability and education system that works the best for us. And so as we continue to work with them, they want us to really explore more flexibility within the confines of federal law and guidance. There's been a couple of states that have put in for actually waivers from federal accountability. That's been Iowa and Indiana. And so seeing how that shakes out will be really interesting. But there's a lot of flexibility out there in terms of federal law around K-12 education that I don't think states are using. And so USED is trying to really put out more of those documents around, what is flexible, how can you become an EdFlex state? And so we're actively pursuing that. Just really want to be on the cutting edge of how we take advantage of those flexibilities, and at the end of the day, get money quicker to our school districts. So that's a little bit on the federal level what we're looking at. Let's see, moving forward, some other things we're looking at right now. Nathan Tajeski, many of you know, is our Chief Innovation Officer. We're diving right now into AI. We really want to be a leader in AI as a state education agency. Also around digital assets education, was just at the Blockchain Stampede conference in Laramie today. And so we want to really be moving forward with that. And so just a lot of innovative things. We're trying to really think outside the box. And sometimes change is uncomfortable, but I think we have to always be looking at how we can do better and better serve our students. One thing I notice, serving on the UW trustees as well as Community College Commission, is there's so much talk about increasing enrollment and just numbers and how we can shift that from what's best for a student in their pathway. It's not always going to be going to the four-year university. I think our community colleges have a critical role to play in this. And, of course, I'm very aware of some of the issue areas that you all have in terms of, how do we get sustainable funding for our community colleges? How do we address those concerns? It was interesting. We had the UW trustees retreat the other month, and legislators were invited, and there was a roundtable discussion. And interestingly enough, for it being University of Wyoming, the main topic that came up was career and technical education. And really a focus on that. And I found that very interesting. And so I think there's a great opportunity for us all to partner in that. I think the legislature is very supportive of that. I very much am so. Community colleges are so well poised to provide that. So anyway, I think this is only the beginning. A lot of exciting work there. Let's see. I'm happy to dive into any of those other areas that we're really working on. Whether it's literacy or teacher shortage, you name it. There's so many different areas we could dive into depending what you're all interested in. So, Erin, I don't know if that was kind of what you're looking for overall remarks, but happy to dive into any details.
I think it was fantastic. So thank you. In fact, I have my little sticky note here of things I wrote down, and then the next thing you talked about was what I wrote down. So thank you for that. No, Superintendent, the colleges are going to be talking about CTE quite a bit. And as you know, over the years, that has been a focus. We've created programs like Wyoming Works for high demand, high skilled jobs. We've also created student grants for those sorts of study areas as well. There'll be a request in the appropriations committee, not only to beef up the programmatic side and the scholarship side for Wyoming Works, but also CTE funding in general for the community colleges. So that's something that we'll be hoping to, I guess, just jump on from where the momentum stopped last session with all the really great work that happened with the K-12 CTE space. And a lot of those folks will be our partners as well. So we're excited about that. A question that I had was, I think AI is on everyone's minds, and I see it trickling into lots of different conversations. Can you tell us a little bit more about what your vision is or what the conversations have been in terms of AI? I think a lot of folks on this Zoom are talking about AI in their colleges and the impacts for students as well, and even how we can deliver better services for students. So it's on obviously both sides.
Absolutely. And it's integrated everywhere. It's within our operations too, right? I mean, we're exploring some use of AI. I think we were the first state agency that really started adopting AI and deciding, what we would use and what parameters. And we're really trying to grab on to anything and everything and explore what that could mean. Like I said, not even in the agency, but also within our schools. So as we've started to kind of explore, nationwide, what other folks are doing, we've kind of found that other states, they aren't really doing much. And so that's where we've kind of seen the space of, Wyoming could really be a leader in this and how we better train students and teachers in utilizing it, because I think a lot of folks have kind of shied away from it. And we've had some conferences for our teachers that have kind of been around some of it, but we have this big gap. We have some that are kind of early adopters and very interested. And so they say, well, we already know these basics. We need you to help us take it to the next level. And then we have a group that is fearful of what this looks like and how they adopt it. And so we're trying to look at how we cater guidance for our school districts to those different levels of expertise and use, and create more of a platform for educators to be able to use it. I think too that kind of it ties into as we look at digital assets and education there. Just today, Charles Hoskinson and his group, they just announced some scholarships for students around digital assets. And I was thinking today in that panel, I thought, well, how could this now apply with community colleges? So anyway, we'll have to visit about that a little bit offline as well, because I see that as being a part of CTE also. So we're very much in the works. We're talking with some tech folks out of Jackson as we speak about some different pilots that we can do with school districts. So there will be more to come, I promise soon, of kind of as we roll out that plan.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. Are there any other questions for folks? Because I have plenty and we can do this all day. I just want to make sure I don't overlook folks who have a question. I see Trustee Dolan. Kathy, take yourself off mute and then we'll be able to hear you.
Yes, we at Casper College, we just had a day and a half workshop around AI. It was sponsored by BOCES 5, Megan. And the expert was I think his name was Matt Davis. But it was a real eye opener for me about how AI can be such a positive support for our students when they know how to use it. I'm thinking of the self-confidence piece. They're not sure about something. They can review their notes. They can review a diagram. They can do all of this using AI as a tutor. And I was just really, really impressed with how helpful it could be used properly and how important it is to train our students to use it as a huge success tool in their toolbox. And you also have the component for the faculty. And using it can increase their efficiency exponentially, so they're able to spend more time with the students, which is what they love to do. And also, I wanted to talk about CTE. Many years ago, as a practicing OT, there were many students that wanted to learn more about OT from the high schools, and there would be a career day. And the schools would actually give them a half day or a day off to shadow the person in the career in which they were interested. And there's such a big emphasis now in the community college level about early on experiential learning. You know, if you want to be a welder, get to the welder shop for a day, or auto mechanic, or whatever. So I'm wondering, in your conversations with school districts, are you seeing districts receptive just to the concept of letting kids go and shadow a career or have that hands-on experience, really be exposed to, and maybe many different things that they're interested in?
Yeah, so first I'll comment on AI some more. I failed to mention, the real focus that we want to see for teachers to be able to use it, because as you may be aware, we have a nationwide shortage of teachers. And so how do we look, you can never replace a teacher in the classroom, but how can we make life easier for them and more efficient? If you go up to, say, Upton, which they're really moving forward in terms of looking at competency-based learning. And what they will tell you is that technology is huge because it allows students within the same cohort to be moving at different levels. And so they're using technology so that over the weekend, a student can be working on competency of a standard. And that just really takes technology to be able to assist with that. And then in terms of CTE and that experiential or work-based learning, that is something, it varies across the board of where districts are in this. But what I will say that the biggest thing is the worry of districts. Some of them are really excited to jump on board of some of these new ideas of experiential learning, getting out of the classroom. But what they struggle with is, well, we still have this accountability system that traps us into this box, and we have to be able to perform well on that. And so that is why at the state level we've said, okay, we need to now change that system, because if we expect them to innovate and think differently in that way, then we have to do that too at the state level in terms of policy. And so that's why this idea of how do we change, our accountability system that welcomes that actually rewards. How do we in a state accountability reward districts for doing these kind of things? That's really what we need to get to, and part of the change that I mentioned.
Thank you.
Superintendent, can you read the chat? We do have a question in here because you've mentioned the student several times. Of course, that is first and foremost on everyone's minds. But what's good for the student? And we're looking at changes that could be possible in the funding model for the colleges, especially since the aspect of completions, et cetera, are potentially impacted by CTE versus degree seeking. So it's an interesting dynamic. I know we've talked about it across the country. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, and this just spurred me to bring up something else that I meant to earlier in terms of Hathaway, as we look at funding and for students. So I'm actively involved in discussions with several legislators around Hathaway. Now, this is nothing new. It feels like every session there's something that someone wants to change with Hathaway. But what I've posed to these legislators is we need to take a step back and reanalyze what the whole purpose of Hathaway was. Because when you look at what it used to do for a student at its inception and what it does for a student now, it's vastly different. And so I do think that there is an appetite there to increase the funding levels of Hathaway. And that's kind of what I'm looking to try to build with them. We're looking at playing around with math of how much are we actually, on average, dumping back into the corpus of the Hathaway Fund that could be actually redistributed to students. Because I know that there'll be concern of not wanting to deplete the corpus, but how do we ensure that we are, ratcheting that up a little bit? What I would ask this group to think about, and I did with some of the members of the Community College Commission board as well, is how could we go about that if we were to propose a change with the legislature of increasing Hathaway? How could we ensure that there is not a commensurate increase in tuition and fees? I know community college, the commission levels around that, but I think there's also the discussion around fees. And so that's one thing that I know would come up with that the legislature could see as a concern of, well, if we increase the Hathaway amount, because that's what's happened over time, then our institutions of higher learning will just increase the cost to meet that. And so, if there are ways that you think that would work, I've kind of been just, this is just what I lay awake at night thinking about. Could we have a 3-year moratorium on that? Does that make sense? How do we ensure that doesn't just happen commensurately? So anyway, I would ask this group to really think about that. But now back to the question. Looking at funding models for community colleges, I do think it's important that we have this conversation around an actual sustainable funding source, because I think that's what's really killing our community colleges. And as we look at property tax changes, it's just so up and down. And as we see with dual and concurrent enrollment, if you don't have a BOCES, that's very difficult. And so we have some school districts that are really struggling in that way with their partnership of their community college. But at the same time, the community colleges aren't able to take on that cost. And so I think that's a conversation we need to have as well, because, my dream is that, gosh, most students, they either have a certification or they graduate, with a year or more of college. But we need to, if we want to support that happening in K-12, we need to figure out a way that it doesn't just eat up community college's budget. So that's one. And then, as you mentioned, looking at the aspect of completions, I'm a person who looks at numbers, and as I mentioned before, I don't think it should just be around what's our enrollment. What is the completion? Are these students filling high need jobs? That's what we should be funding. I even brought that up about Hathaway. Should increased Hathaway amounts be commensurate with high need, jobs in the state? Do we fund those more depending on where the need is? So anyway, I do think that the legislature right now, I've had a lot of conversations with appropriations members. I do think that there is an appetite to start talking about this now. So it's good timing. And I think the more that we can partner together, because I think when you tell the story of K-12 and how this is part of their continuum, it's not just the colleges, trying to go for more money. It's not just the school districts trying to get more money. We're talking about individual students and how they contribute to our economy. And I think that's where we can really tell a story together that maybe that's been missing. And so that I think will be exciting. And I'm ready to partner with all the colleges. I think that, we can probably do better in how WDE partners with each of you.
No, thank you for that. I think the colleges continue, and I just saw a headline even about UW's enrollment recently. Enrollment is a word we all kind of dance around and we often forget to look at completion. And the numbers in Wyoming are really high, especially for the colleges. The adult learners, that is such a success story in Wyoming, and for adult education. And even with the federal threats of federal funding going away, we were really telling that story out loud about why that's so important across the whole state. So we've talked about that. I love that you threw something else out to us. We'll talk about that. We're all meeting next week in Douglas. I don't know if you're planning to be there. I know you always have someone there if you can't be there. But we are all continuing to talk about that. Superintendent, what I'll ask you is, given that this is a budget session, what do you see on the front burner for education in the state? And so I won't limit it to K-12, but broadly, what do you see And we've talked about CTE, but what else do you see that might just be top of mind for that legislature when they all come down to Cheyenne?
Well, for me, it's literacy. That's going to be my top priority going into this session. As I mentioned, we at the end of September, we're set to lose a federal competitive grant around literacy, and that included 4 employees at the Department of Education. And so, without that grant, we go from that to zero people at the Department of Education focused on literacy. And this is a huge priority area for me. I likely don't have to convince any of you that if you can't read by 3rd grade, your future is dim, and we have to do better at that, particularly as a country, but also as a state. We have school districts that have single-digit proficiency in English language arts. We have to do better. And so that's going to be a huge one. We did just hear, as I said, I've been doing a lot of work with the feds, that we are likely going to be getting at least some of that grant back. They're looking at redistributing funds. So I don't want to commit anything, but we're really excited about that. And so that's what I'm prioritizing, is literacy positions at the WDE, the ability to really move the needle there. There's so many other ones. That's what's hard about budget session. We have been asked to go back to our 2019 funding levels. And so I'm absorbing, like I said, a high leadership. I'm not rehiring the chief academic officer position, but repurposing that to a literacy position to get some savings, but also to prioritize literacy there. And just looking at how we can go through our contracts and get back to 2019 levels there in terms of spending. I think, let's see, others in terms of budgets. It will, for me, it's about how do we work with the Joint Appropriations Committee to be able to work with them in that rather than just have over the top cut, across the board cuts. I'd rather look at how we can create efficiencies than cut programs, so we can still, be sustainable in that regard. So that's a front and center for me this session. There are so many other needs. Our farm to school program, that federal funding is cut. And so we've been asked, if we want to ask the legislature for that funding, other different programs. But I'm really just trying to keep it bare bones and focus on literacy this session.
Well, that is fantastic. We all know budget sessions are fast and furious, and so given the budget requests that the colleges will have, we'll be in it as well. And I think we all see the need to really educate. WACCT and the colleges did commission an ROI study with WACCT last year, and so we'll be really leaning into that sort of data to talk about the value of the colleges as being such comprehensive entities that they are across the spectrum of education. So we're really excited about doing that. Any other questions that folks here have? I don't need to hear myself speak. I want to make sure we give everyone else an opportunity.
Let's see,
Okay.
in the chat here, entrepreneurship, starting middle school, high school, what collaborations? Yeah, great question. I think, this fits into a lot of our discussion of that profile of a graduate and entrepreneurship, but also, things like financial literacy, different pathway options. I see this as one of those, core pathways that we can grow together. In terms of collaboration with post-secondary, yeah, that's interesting for entrepreneurship. For me, I'm always interested in how we can create these new models. And so if there's something there with the community colleges, I'd be, game to be discussing that. I think, and maybe it's good for us to check in of kind of, what things we're working on that sometimes maybe we get into our silos and we forget, oh, this is going on at the community college or this we could be really building, whether that's, our patriotism efforts that we're kind of working on, our teacher training, those sort of things. So not specifically right now that we're working on entrepreneurship, but I like the idea of that. And the concept of starting early. We've started talking about that with CTE and these student success plans. Exposure. The earlier that kids can kind of start to see that, the better. and especially with that experiential learning. And I think, that solves a greater problem that we talk about in the state of, the exodus of our youth. In a lot of ways, there just hasn't been that exposure to even see what's available to them. And so that's this idea of how do you have more of this work-based learning or experiential where a kid they can go work with a company, someone who started their own company in Wyoming, and be a part of that and see what that's like. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity there to work with current Wyoming employers to give students a taste of that.
Thank you for that. And thank you for checking that chat. That question was sitting right there and I thought it was the last question. So I apologize for that. Well, Superintendent, I have heard so many great words. I mean, Wyoming we've been a leader in a lot of things. And sometimes we feel like we're behind the 8 ball just because we're small, but oftentimes that's our strength. And I've heard a lot of words today that I think play to that: the partnership, opportunity, vision, pathways to careers, accountability, student opportunities. This is why we're all involved in this. And so I think that the commitment from WACCT and I know everyone here is that we will continue to be a partner. We'll continue to tell the stories. I think learning from each other is something that we still have an opportunity to just continue to do constantly. And figure out what's next. The Wyoming Innovation Partnership moving over under the Business Alliance is really exciting and really driving that tide industry that I believe we've been trying to get. The colleges have that every day on a lot of things, but how can we make this broader with that whole vision of education? I think a lot of us are really excited about that.
And then another thing I'll mention, Erin, I was just thinking about, some of my other hats that I wear as a statewide elected, including the State Building Commission. I am the chair of the Committee on Capital Construction. And just want folks to know, we've tried to this year we really want to separate out the use of funds that have already been allocated rather than new funds. And so I know that there are I think some of the colleges had that occur where with last year when we didn't have a CapCon bill, the issue was you couldn't even use funding from other sources. And so because I don't think the legislature was recognizing that they weren't all new funds. And so we tried to separate that out. And then went through and prioritized those requests that came from a couple of the colleges again. And so we'll continue to advocate for those projects. And so anyway, just wanted to throw that in as well.
Yep. Thank you for that. No, so important. And it's always traumatic when we don't have a certain type of bill. CapCon has only not passed twice in my career, and it's always a big deal, especially for those colleges who are planning on those projects. So I appreciate that.
Was the word I was looking for. Spending authority. For spending authority only. I mean, that's what was kind of an issue, is that with no CapCon bill, they couldn't even use spending authority. So anyway.
Yeah, no, it's a big deal. And you certainly are wearing a lot of hats. So we appreciate that. I'm going to say that we'll give everyone 15 minutes back if there aren't any more questions. But gosh, this has been so just eye-opening, I think really inspiring, and a lot of energy. And I think that's really fun. And even at the end of the day, we can still have all of that. So Superintendent, thank you so much. The commitment from WACCT, we're here to be your partner, and we're excited to see what's next.
Great. And I would say too, to maybe think, in addition to the Hathaway ask, how I can better engage with you all. I was just thinking I really need to have, check-ins with the different community college presidents to see, because there are a lot of things going on out there that, we don't need to recreate the wheel. And so if there's a way that you guys think that works with, getting trustees involved, happy to engage in that.
That's awesome. I'll carry that back, and we'll make sure we communicate both of those questions in the replay as we share it out too. Well, great. Well, appreciate it. Thank you everyone for joining, and have a great weekend. We're almost there.
Thanks.